Funeral directors say they may have to ask bereaved families to pay any fines incurred if a service breaches coronavirus restrictions. The National Association of Funeral Directors said it was utterly ridiculous. Its members risked penalties for doing a frontline job. Police in Hertfordshire fined an undertaker £10,000 when 150 mourners went to a ceremony last week.
A police officer who died during the siege of the US Capitol on the 6th of January will lie in honour in the building. Officer Brian Sicknick was injured engaging with protesters and died the following day. He was one of 5 people to lose their lives in the riot, which led to Donald Trump's second impeachment.
The Home Office says a fire at a former military barracks in Kent, housing hundreds of asylum seekers, was started deliberately. Officials said people had set about destroying the barracks because they objected to not being moved from the site after a Covid outbreak. The ex-military site in Folkestone has been used to house around 400 asylum seekers since September.
A major road covered in landslips is one of 3 projects to benefit from £93 million of government funding, the Transport Secretary Grant Shapps has announced. The plans include diverting the A59 away from an unstable section in North Yorkshire and improving one of the most heavily congested junctions in the West Midlands. But charities such as the RSPB are concerned about the scheme's impact on wildlife and carbon emissions.
Let's have a look at the papers for you this morning, Saturday morning, 6:20. The Sun, let's start there. Like many of today's papers, leading on that EU vaccines row, quoting the former Conservative Party leader Ian Duncan-Smith, who accuses the EU of childish and arrogant behaviour. Of course, there's been a flip-flop overnight. We'll try and get you clarity on just how that story has developed, because late into the night last night, there were some major changes.
Elsewhere, The Times has an interview with the EU's chief Brexit negotiator, Michel Barnier. Interesting to get his take on it. He says he wants a spirit of cooperation between Brussels and the UK over the issue. It quotes him as saying, "We must face the crisis with responsibility and not one-upmanship or unhealthy competition."
The weekend reports on the development of the single-dose Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which says could transform prospects for fighting Covid-19. The paper reports that no one from the clinical trial required hospitalisation or died from the virus.
And the Yorkshire Post has a special report 1 year on since the county found itself at the heart of Britain's initial coronavirus outbreak, with the UK's first suspected case at that hotel in York last January, if you remember. The paper also pays tribute to the 10,000 victims who've died in the region since the start of the pandemic.
I'm not going to be flippant about this story because clearly it's about masks, and masks are of great importance and much talked about. Question they're asking The Guardian today is about people who are double masking, a bit like double denim, is it? Similar kind of thing, but of much more health significance.
Yeah.
So they've got a number of people, including the new president, Joe Biden. So the thing is there, and you may have noticed this, because it's fairly obvious, he's got a kind of a full kind of plastic mask.
One of those respirator masks.
Yeah, and then puts a,
cloth mask on top.
Cloth mask over the top. Sometimes one with what looks like penguins there. Anthony Fauci wearing one with penguins on, or something more fashionable. And, the experts saying, of course, nothing wrong with wearing 2 masks. I mean,
yeah.
There's not really a downside to that.
No, the question is whether we need to, whether these new variants are more transmissible through airborne means, which makes 2 masks instead of one slightly manky cloth mask that we have lying in the bottom of our bags. Appropriate. Just quickly, this one, talking about lots of people getting dogs in lockdown, because we're going to talk to Tony Robinson later on, who has himself got a rescue dog, and he's now become patron of his local RSPCA. But they're saying here that a lot of people are not necessarily being as responsible as they should be in terms of cleaning up their dog's mess. So there is an issue, which we've been pretty good at dealing with this in this country, haven't we? Mostly, for the most part, of not leaving dogs less around.